All right, so today we are going to be diving deep into Jesse Lee Peterson,
Oh, yeah.
a figure who stirred up, well, quite a lot of controversy. You
Yeah.
guys have sent us a ton of articles, research, and even like your own personal notes.
Wow.
And let me tell you, this is really shaping up to be a fascinating puzzle.
Yeah, what's really interesting right off the bat is Peterson built his platform advocating for these, traditional values, personal responsibility, and this very specific idea of family.
Uh-huh.
And he's been super vocal against what he considers the dangers of, liberal policies and LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah.
But then we've also got these serious allegations of sexual misconduct from multiple men.
Yeah, and those allegations, I mean, they really complicate things. It's
Yeah.
not just like a he said, they said.
Right.
This really gets to the core of like his whole public image, and his message.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so,
Oh.
intriguing, right? We're going to be looking at Peterson's core beliefs, the specifics of these allegations, and the impact, the fallout.
Right.
But to really get him, I think we got to go back.
Yeah.
We got to go back to his past.
Okay, so let's unpack those core beliefs.
Yeah.
I mean, his book, The Antidote, that seems like a good place to start.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's basically required reading if you want to understand his philosophy, right?
Absolutely. The Antidote lays out, his main arguments against what he calls the victimhood mentality.
Okay.
And he really goes after what he sees as, the victimhood mentality among Black Americans in particular.
Uh-huh.
He says it breeds dependency and prevents people from, taking control of their own lives.
And he's not exactly subtle about it.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
there's that quote where he says, one of the greatest mistakes America made was to allow women the opportunity to vote.
Wow.
Like, come on, you don't hear that every day.
No, you don't. Even from hardcore conservatives.
Right.
And that's like his signature, right?
Yeah.
Peterson, he's very direct, uncompromising.
Yeah.
He doesn't pull any punches.
No.
He's also been a huge critic of Black History Month, Kwanzaa, affirmative action, anything that he sees as promoting, group identity or what he calls special treatment.
And it all ties into his, like, fierce opposition to anything he considers a government handout.
Oh, yeah.
He constantly emphasizes personal responsibility over relying on any social safety nets.
He even goes so far as to compare Black Lives Matter to the Ku Klux Klan.
Whoa.
Argues that both promote, division and hatred based on race.
Yeah,
It's provocative even for conservatives.
yeah, it's like he's deliberately trying to just shake things up.
Yeah.
Challenge conventional wisdom, even if it means, like, alienating people.
Right.
But where it gets really messy, maybe even explosive, is with his stance on LGBTQ plus rights.
His rhetoric on this issue has been particularly strong. He calls LGBTQ plus rights evil, refers to pride parades as gatherings of children of Satan, and even advocates for conversion therapy.
Yeah, I mean, those are incredibly inflammatory statements.
For sure.
And that's what makes these allegations of sexual misconduct from men so jarring, right? It feels like such a direct contradiction.
It really does. It's like he's publicly condemning homosexuality.
Yeah.
But then you have these allegations.
Just a huge contrast.
Yeah, one of the accusers, Patrick Rooney, claims to have had a 10-year relationship with Peterson.
Wow.
Another, Samuel Arambula, has also, come forward with his own account.
So it's not just like, rumors flying around.
No, these allegations were actually published.
Right.
Places like Church Militant and the Daily Beast, which suggests there's some credibility to these claims.
Right, right.
And the impact has been significant. Protests at Peterson's organization, Bon Andy, he's been banned from at least one major conference.
And even some guys in the manosphere.
In Manosphere.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it's this kind of online community often focused on, like, men's rights issues and certain views of masculinity.
Got it.
So even some of those guys are starting to back away from him.
Really? It really shows you how seriously people are taking these accusations.
Yeah, even those who might, agree with Peterson on other issues.
Right.
But what I find interesting is Peterson himself has been pretty quiet.
Yeah.
He's mostly avoided, directly addressing the allegations, which just makes it even more complicated.
Oh, there was that one time on his show when he was asked about the allegations.
Oh, yeah.
And he just dismissed the woman asking as wicked and ended the call.
Wow, it's like he's trying to sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, hoping it'll all just go away.
But then there's this whole other problem, a federal criminal case in Idaho.
Yeah, this is separate from the allegations, but definitely adds another layer to this story.
Okay.
He's pleaded guilty, though the details are still a bit murky.
Yeah.
But the point is, he's currently detained until sentencing.
So it's like this incredibly complex picture,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
This guy who preaches personal responsibility, but faces these serious accusations of misconduct.
Yeah.
And he condemns homosexuality, but then these allegations come from men.
A lot to process.
It really is. To even start to unpack all of this, we got to go back.
Back to the beginning.
Yeah, Peterson was raised by his grandparents on a plantation in Alabama.
Wow. Think about that environment.
Yeah.
The racial dynamics, the poverty, the legacy of slavery.
Yeah, I mean, that has to have a huge impact on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Especially at such a young age.
Right. And on top of all that, his parents weren't around.
That's right. That kind of absence, it can really leave a mark.
What's interesting is his grandparents taught him that their poverty wasn't because of systemic racism or the effects of slavery, but because of their own moral failings.
Wow.
It's almost like he internalized that and completely rejects the idea of systemic racism as an explanation for hardship.
That's a huge contrast, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he grew up on a plantation where his ancestors were enslaved.
It's hard to believe that wouldn't affect his views on race.
Yeah, you'd think.
But for Peterson, it seems like it had the opposite effect.
Interesting.
He saw his early struggles as a consequence of his own hatred for white people,
Wow.
not as a result of, any systems or structures in place.
So we're starting to see how his past shaped his worldview.
Yeah, but before we get into that, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
And when we come back, we'll dig deeper into Peterson's ideological shifts
Right.
and how he built his platform.
Can't wait.
Stay with us.
Welcome back. Before we go any further with his past, I think it's important to go back to those allegations.
Yeah.
And really think about the potential impact, right? I mean, it's hard to reconcile this image of the guy preaching personal responsibility and traditional family values
Right.
with these accusations of sexual misconduct, especially from men.
It really is a lot to process, His message is so rooted in this moral framework, centered on, heterosexual relationships and condemning anything outside of that.
Right.
So these allegations, if they're true, I mean, they really strike at the foundation of that whole framework.
And it makes you think about the psychology of it all,
Yeah.
How do people who've built their identity around these specific beliefs, who see themselves as like these moral authorities,
Right.
how do they handle these accusations?
Do they double down or does it force some kind of introspection?
Right. It has to be jarring.
Yeah, it's not just about reputation. It's about questioning your whole sense of self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've already seen how these allegations have had a real impact. The protests at Bondi headquarters, the conference that banned him. I mean, those are real consequences.
Yeah, and even within the manosphere, like we were saying before,
Right.
there's this feeling of unease.
Yeah. These are guys who often have pretty traditional views
Right.
on gender roles and relationships. And even there, stepping back.
Yeah, it really shows you how seriously these accusations are being taken.
Exactly. Even by those who might otherwise support Peterson.
It makes you wonder what this means for his followers, the people who, really connected with his message.
Right.
The ones who saw him as this, guiding light.
Does it shake their faith?
Yeah, or do they, rationalize it?
Right. Try to separate the allegations from his teachings.
I bet there's a whole spectrum of reactions out there,
For sure.
Some probably feel betrayed or disillusioned. Others might, cling even tighter.
Yeah. See this as proof
Yeah.
that he's being attacked for his beliefs.
Right. It's
Yeah.
it really shows you the power of these belief systems,
Yeah. How people deal with information that challenges what they believe.
Exactly. And this case, I think, really highlights the importance of, critical thinking,
Oh, that's
questioning assumptions.
not just accepting one narrative,
Yeah, looking at the evidence, weighing different perspectives.
forming your own conclusions.
Okay, so let's get back to Peterson's past.
Okay.
We talked about his childhood, growing up on that plantation.
Right.
But I think it's worth exploring how that might have led him to, internalize blame
Yeah.
and reject the idea of systemic racism.
His story really shows how your personal history can shape how you see the world. And sometimes in ways you wouldn't expect.
Right.
Imagine growing up in a place where poverty and struggle, they're blamed not on racism,
Yeah.
but on your own personal flaws,
That's got to be tough.
especially coming from your grandparents, people you trust.
Right. It's like he absorbed that message.
Yeah. Used it to understand his own life.
And then applied it to, everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea of internalizing blame, that's something psychologists have studied, especially in marginalized communities.
Interesting.
It's a way to cope, to make sense of suffering,
Uh-huh.
maintain some control when the world feels unfair.
So his rejection of systemic racism, that focus on personal responsibility,
Yeah,
could be seen as like a product of his environment,
right.
a way of dealing with, growing up Black in the Jim Crow South.
It's an interesting thought, and it doesn't mean personal responsibility isn't important,
Right.
but it adds another layer to the conversation.
Yeah, it's not about saying people have no responsibility.
Right.
But it's about recognizing that, not everyone starts at the same place.
Exactly. Some face bigger obstacles based on their race, their gender, their background.
And that's why this whole discussion about systemic racism is so important.
Yeah, it's not about blaming anyone or saying people don't have choices.
Right.
It's about understanding that historical injustices and ongoing inequalities, they create real barriers.
Yeah, it's like trying to run a race
Uh-huh.
where some runners are starting miles behind everyone else.
Exactly. They might be amazing runners,
Yeah,
but they're at a disadvantage from the start.
that's a great analogy. So we've seen how his childhood might have shaped his views on race and responsibility,
Yeah,
but then there's this period where he's super involved in Black nationalist movements,
that's right.
even working with Louis Farrakhan.
It's like a totally different approach to identity politics.
Yeah, emphasizing Black empowerment and separatism.
The opposite of the conservatism he embraces later.
It's hard to imagine someone going from one extreme to the other.
It is. It makes you wonder what caused that change.
Yeah.
Was it a genuine shift in his thinking?
Or was it something else?
It's tough to say for sure. But maybe he was looking for a sense of belonging, a community that understood his experiences.
Maybe.
Maybe he became disillusioned with the Black nationalist movement.
Okay.
Or maybe he had a genuine spiritual awakening
Right.
that led him to Christianity and then, conservative politics.
It's interesting how personal experiences, those that really challenge your worldview, can change your beliefs and values so much.
Sometimes it's gradual, sometimes it's like a sudden realization.
And it's important to remember that we're all always changing,
Oh, yeah.
Our beliefs are shaped by so many things.
Our experiences, what we read, who we talk to,
It's a never-ending process.
learning, unlearning, reevaluating.
So in his late 30s, Peterson goes through this huge change,
Yeah.
embraces Christianity and conservatism,
Uh-huh.
and starts building his platform.
He founds Bondi, he starts his radio show, becomes a regular at CPAC.
Right, it's like he's found his purpose.
And he's good at it.
Yeah.
He connects with a specific audience.
Yeah.
People drawn to his message of self-reliance, traditional values,
All right.
and his criticism of what he sees as, liberal excesses.
He becomes the sought-after commentator, goes on Fox News, writes books.
He's a media force.
But even as he's building all this, those rumors about his personal life, those allegations, they never really go away.
It's like this shadow hanging over him.
Yeah, threatening to undermine everything he's built.
It creates a real tension, almost like something out of Shakespeare.
I know, right?
You have this man preaching morality,
Yeah.
but his own actions, if true, completely contradict what he's saying.
It's like it reminds us that people are complicated, full of contradictions.
We can admire someone's work,
Right.
their ideas, while still acknowledging that they're flawed.
That they can make mistakes.
Separating the art from the artist, it's messy.
Yeah, it really is. It reminds us to be skeptical.
Of everyone.
Right.
Of every source of information.
Ask questions, to dig deeper.
To understand that the truth is usually much more complex than any one story can tell.
So as we go into the last part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's keep all of this in mind.
All right.
How do we make sense of these contradictions in Peterson's life and work?
Yeah.
How do we weigh his contributions against these allegations?
Good questions.
And what can we learn from his story about belief, about identity, about how messy human nature really is?
Those are the questions we'll be thinking about in our final segment.
Stay with us. Okay, so we're back and ready for the last part of our deep dive into Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey.
It really has. I mean, we've covered his core beliefs, those allegations, his upbringing, his rise to fame.
Yeah.
It feels like everywhere we look, there's another layer to uncover.
That's what makes it so interesting, right?
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up, I'm curious, what stood out to you the most?
I think for me, it's that connection between his personal history and, his public persona,
Right.
Peterson's upbringing, especially that childhood on the plantation, it really shaped his worldview.
Absolutely. He took those experiences, the poverty, the absent parents, and it really fueled his belief in self-reliance and personal responsibility
Yeah.
and that complete rejection of systemic racism.
It's almost like he saw those early struggles as, like, personal failures
Yeah.
and then applied that to, bigger societal issues.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how our own stories, our experiences can impact not just us, but like the ideas we put out into the world.
Absolutely. And for Peterson, those ideas have reached a huge audience.
Right, through his books, his radio show, his appearances on Fox News.
It's a big platform.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what is it about his message that resonates so strongly with people?
I think for some, it's that desire for clear answers, for a sense of order in a world that feels so chaotic. Peterson offers this, like, black and white view
Yeah.
where personal responsibility is everything and traditional values are, like, the solution.
It's appealing, especially to people who feel like the system has let them down.
Yeah, it gives them a sense of control.
Right, this belief that they can overcome anything through willpower and, sticking to a moral code.
And there's truth to that, right?
Huh.
Personal responsibility is important.
Of course.
Traditional values can be grounding,
Uh-huh.
but the problem is it oversimplifies things.
Right, it ignores the systemic factors that lead to inequality and suffering.
We need to find a balance,
Yeah.
recognizing individual agency, but also acknowledging systemic injustice,
And that brings us back to those allegations.
right? The elephant in the room.
How do we reconcile this guy who preaches personal responsibility, family values, condemns homosexuality, with these accusations from men claiming they were in sexual relationships with him?
It's a contradiction. There's no way around it.
It's a reminder that even the people who seem like moral authorities, they're capable of things that go against their values.
You can appreciate someone's work, but still condemn harmful actions.
Yeah, and ultimately it's up to each person to decide how they want to engage with Peterson's work, knowing all of this.
It's not an easy decision.
No, do you dismiss everything he's done, or do you try to, separate it?
Acknowledge some good ideas, but still condemn the alleged behavior.
This goes beyond just Jesse Lee Peterson, though.
It does.
It's about how we handle complexity, conflicting ideas.
While we form our own judgment.
This deep dive, it's taken us on quite a journey.
It has. We've looked at personal narratives, belief systems, public image versus private actions.
And maybe we don't have all the answers.
But hopefully this has given you some tools, some new perspectives.
To keep thinking about these questions.
Long after this episode is over.
That's what the deep dive is all about.
Like that.
We tackle the tough topics, the uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah.
We embrace the messiness, the contradictions.
That's where the real learning happens.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jesse Lee Peterson,
Okay.
keep asking questions, challenge assumptions,
Right.
keep diving deep into the complexities of the world around you.
Well said. Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.